Hello. Um, it's been a minute. As you can see around me, my environment is different. Um, and why I haven't recorded this in a while is because I've moved house. So, um, yeah, I've been pretty busy, been a bit stressful and all that good stuff. But I'm here now. I'm comfortable. New setup, new chair. You can see all my some of my Blooming Two stuff and all that on the shelf there. And maybe you can see my CDs. I'm not sure. I might have a Mujica CDs, but yeah, we're in a different place now. You might, and the mic might end up picking up sounds from outside because I'm in the bustling city where it's lively and the town never sleeps. But no, you might hear stuff from outside. I don't know. You might not. But yeah. But we're here today for um. This is a ship's tier list, but I want to more talk about not just them romantically, but them as a pair, as a dynamic, and their relationship. Not just I don't want to just limit myself to talking about them romantically and from a shipping lens. Of course, I'll factor that in if I think it's applicable, but there's just so much more to discuss and analyze about these characters beyond romantic implications and feelings and all that kind of stuff. So I'll probably put shipping in the title because more people will probably click if I put shipping, but it's a shipping slash pairs slash dynamic. So it's just how each character is interacts with each other and how much I like them. Basically, there isn't really um is not really a specific kind of word for that, but I don't know if I'll do it all today because as you can see, there's obviously there's 11 characters in the main cast, so that's a lot of ships. That's a lot of pairings, a lot of people to get through. So I don't know if I'll do this all in one sitting. If it will be one video, I'm not sure. We'll see what happens. You'll know by the time you're watching this. Um, so let's just get started. Get straight into it. I think I'll just do it in order. We're starting off with Anon, and first like pairing is Anon and Mortis, and there's just not really anything going on there between them. I think their only interaction basically was I remember in episode maybe 6 where Mortis comes in and Anon thinks that she's Mutsumi and then Anon is pretty insensitive with her. And apart from that, there just isn't really much there. I kind of like how Anon recognized Mortis's acting in the episode 7 scene. I think that's cool that Anon was perceptive like that and could recognize that in Mortis. But that's just kind of Anon on her own, just being Anon. She can kind of see that in anyone. It's not really something that's alone to Mortis. So Anon and Mortis, there just isn't really anything there. And there might be a couple ships and pairings and dynamics in here that I kind of headcanon a bit, but I don't really know. I think I'll find out when I get to them, you know. But as far as Anon and Mortis go, they're basically non-existent in the story, and that's fine. It's like I'm not expecting every character to be kind of having a really intricate relationship with every character, but I mean, if there's stuff that I'm missing or that I overlook between two characters that you want to add on in the comments, and feel free, obviously, because for one, this is going to be a long video, so I might not remember or think about everything, and two, like with a pairing like Mortis and Anon, there's just not much on the surface in the text that I might have picked up on, but there could be a lot of interesting parallels and kind of more subtle things going on there. But like I said, I'm not going to pick it all up in this video, so if there's anything you want to add on to any of these, then feel free. Anon and Mutsumi, I think there's a bit more going on there. I think for me they were kind of my like quack ship before Mujica started, because I kind of like to imagine obviously the Anon, the super Genki girl, and Mutsumi, the super quiet one, their kind of relationship. I just enjoy that ship dynamic, so that's more of a kind of just a headcanon quack ship for me rather than any sort of in-text dynamic. It's just but so I'll put it above them just because I think there's a little bit, and I like that scene where I really like in episode 7 when Anon gives Mutsumi the guitar, and Mutsumi also thanks her for it. I think they could have a really nice relationship, basically, but obviously it's stuff that hasn't really happened in the anime, or maybe might not happen. I mean, they've barely interacted. I don't think they even meet in MyGo. And I think the first time they kind of do interact properly is episode 7 of Mujica, I think. But yeah, like I said, there's not really much going on there between Anon and Mutsumi or Mortis. So next we have Anon and Nyamu. Obviously, they're kind of the trend, both the trendy girls of each band, obviously in tune with the trend and the social happenings and all that. There's definitely parallels between them. There's definitely similarities, and they were the card story for the first Ave MyGo cards that came out recently. It was Nyamu and Anon focused, a really fun card art for them too. But I read that story and I like their dynamic a lot, because Nyamu is just kind of fed up with Anon and being a fan, but Anon in her head fantasizes about the idea of her being basically in Nyamu's position, but Nyamu being in the position that she's in, that Anon wants to be, doesn't really like that kind of stuff. But I mean, as far as they go as a dynamic, like, there's just not much happening there, which is fine again. But I think there's definitely more than Anon and Mutsumi, but I don't think it's really enough to warrant an A. Like Anon and Mutsumi, I would say like a low B. Anon and Nyamu, a high B. And again, there's definitely stuff I'm missing, but it's stuff I need to think about properly rather than do an off-the-cuff kind of video on it. But I like them. I think they're a cute kind of pair. I wouldn't really ship them at all, but I think there's definitely something there between them, but not much for me to really get interested in. And now we have Anon and Rana, which has started to be called Strawberry Matcha in the community, which is a very cute name, and I really like them. I really like both of them as the two in MyGo that aren't chained down by Kreischick and that whole thing. And it's represented in the recent, not the Haru Hokage, the one before Ichi, I forget the name of that song, but the Ichi, the one they performed in the anime, that music video, they're two characters that they're the ones that reach out to Tomori in that video and in the visuals there. And like I said, they're the two characters that aren't chained down by this sort of longing kind of past that the other members of MyGo are. And I think that one of the main things that really made me really like them too as not a ship but as a pairing was their solo duo in the final episode in that Ishii performance. They're just, I don't know, it was just cool seeing Anon be able to match Rana in kind of like quality there, and performing, because they've come a long way. They've come a really long way, Anon has especially. And the thing is, there's not a lot going on between them in terms of like banter or interactions in the show, but I do like them as a pair, like I said, that are just separated from all the Kreischick stuff basically, and kind of they're moving on from their own stuff there, and they're not, I don't want to say they're moving on alone in that way, but they are not as, like as I meant, not as chained down. They're more the freer ones in MyGo compared to the other three. For most of the show, obviously now it's not the same because they've all moved on from Kreischick, but for the most of MyGo and most of our Mujica, that is the case with them. And it's it's portrayed in the music videos for MyGO as well. There, a lot of the times you do see Anon and Rana portrayed together or portrayed separately because they haven't got that past and how they haven't got that connection with Kreishyk. But I like them. I really like them. I think that aesthetically they're a cute ship as well. The pink and silver hair. But yeah, I think they're just a nice little pairing. You know, not something I'd ship romantically, but I mean that's more kind of Rana in general. There almost isn't anyone I'd ship romantically with Rana, but honestly, almost same with Anon. But we'll get to Anon because some of her more interesting pairings are coming up now. And one of those interesting pairings is Anon and Saki. And this, I'm a really big fan of this. I'm not sure I can put it in the same tier as some of the other ones because in terms of interactions there isn't as much, but it might be up there, you know. It might be up there in Save My Life. No, I'm going to leave it. It'll be a high S probably by the end, but I'm a big fan of them too. I'm a big fan of how they're foils to Tomori. They're different kind of. There's a lot of parallels between them, which interestingly enough weren't intentional. There was an interview between the writer Yuniko and the Hibike writer Ayano Takada, and Takada mentioned how she really liked Anon and Saki and how they kind of parallel each other, and there's lots of stuff going on between them in terms of how they brought Tomori out of the dark and into the light. But Yuniko mentioned that she wasn't really aware of, she didn't write that consciously. That was just something that kind of happened naturally as she was writing, and she wasn't even aware of it until Takada pointed it out, which is really interesting because there is genuinely a lot between those two, Anon and Saki, in text that doesn't feel unintentional. But that's a kind of just a testament to how tightly written a lot of parts of the story are and a lot of the characters are, and how they kind of parallel and kind of interact with each other, and just how naturally well written a lot of them are. These things, because of the quality of the writing, are gonna appear naturally, because that is just, if you have a good sense of the story, a good sense of the characters, a good scope, a good bigger picture, these things are just gonna happen on their own without you even meaning them. And Anon and Saki is kind of the best example of that in MyGO, and how well written the show and the characters are, because that isn't just something that can appear coincidentally, because it runs deep between Anon and Saki, how they both obviously brought Tomori out of the dark into the light, but also their different forms of selfishness and selflessness. Saki has this, I mentioned this in one of the other tier list videos, but Saki has this selfish form of selflessness where I always get this mixed up. She has a selfless form of selfishness where a lot of what she does, Saki cares greatly about other people, but her actions in trying to make things better for other people often make things worse. And like, we see it with Mutsumi, we see it with Mujica in general, we see it with Tomori even. But then Anon, on the other hand, is definitely more selfish than Sakiko, I think, but her actions and what she does ends up more positively affecting those around her. And Anon in particular, while she is, like I said, she's selfish. She has an ego. She very much and wants to appease that, but she greatly cares about her band and her friends, and it's the same with Sakiko. It's just that the way they go about expressing that selflessness is different, and they parallel each other. They have the same thing going on, but they do it in different ways, and the way it affects those around her and the story is completely different. It's much more positive on Anon's side than it is on Sakiko's side, and I think that's really interesting because they are for me, it's like Anon, Saki, Tomori, and Wika are like not the main characters, but they're very much the core of the story, I think. And that's not to say the other characters aren't, but those are the 4 characters that are really at the heart of the story and really drive and move the story forward. But yeah, basically Anon and Saki, brilliant, awesome. Not sure I'm not interested in shipping them romantically. I'm not against it, but for me there's just a lot of interesting stuff to analyse between them, and I think they're a pairing that do get overlooked, I think, by the community in general, because obviously isn't an as obvious pairing as something like Taki Tomori or Saki and Tomori, that kind of thing, you know. And talking about good pairings and shipping and good ships in particular, we have Anon and Soyo, Anzi, probably the most popular, I'm almost certain it's the most popular ship in the community. Their fan art always blows up. I know people that don't even know the show that know about Anzi, and it's interesting because when I finished MyGO, I wasn't not a fan of them, but I was just a bit neutral on them, and I just didn't really feel much towards Anon and Soyo as a dynamic and as a ship especially. I think I was more interested in them, like analysing them and how Anon and Soyo treat each other rather than looking at them more in a romantic lens. But ever since it ended, the fan art, some of the game stories, even this one fan fiction, Star Relic, Chinese fan fiction, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's one of the best things I've ever read, and it's kind of an Anzi fanfic, like kind of, but there's a lot more going on, and I don't know. Ever since MyGO ended, I finished MyGO. I've been indoctrinated into the Anzi cult and their kind of attitude toward each other, and their whole thing is kind of Anon kind of teasing Soyo and Soyo kind of reluctantly accepting it and pretending she doesn't like it, very kind of Tsundere-esque kind of esque. But I don't know. I wasn't really one to kind of ship characters that heavily either. It really wasn't as prominent in the text romantically. I mean, we get that moment in episode 10 of MyGO where Anon fixes Soyo's hair after she puts on the guitar, which, interestingly enough, was something that I didn't realise until someone pointed it out on Twitter recently. We see Anon in maybe episode 4 or maybe 6 of MyGO. We see Anon notice Soyo fixing her hair after she puts on her bass, and that was something that ended up actually not foreshadowing, but it is relevant to the story, as with it's the kind of show where most of these things, most of these little actions, these little looks, these dialogue, the framing, all that kind of stuff, it's all relevant, and there's something there. It's all intentional, and obviously that pays off a bit in episode 10. And I also know that scene, I think they wanted to, someone on the staff wanted to cut it out, but because of time issues. But I think Unico, or the director, it might have been Unico, said, like, if you cut this out, we're not doing the episode. Like, that's how important this is. And I don't know, there's just something about them too that is depicted in the fan art, like I said, that in general, that their kind of stereotypes and their character archetypes that really pair well together, and they're just, apart from just being really entertaining on screen, like Soyo always being pissed off at Anon, and Anon caring for Soyo amount. I mean, we see it in MyGO in our Mujica episode 1 where she gets invited to go to the concert, and she reluctantly goes with Anon. But there's also just a lot beyond them romantically, and how Anon recognized Soyo's kindness, recognized Soyo beyond all this scheming and these harmful things that Soyo was doing for the duration of MyGo, and this kind of mask that Soyo puts up. Anon saw through that, or not even saw through it, but she saw beyond it. And I think that what really defines their relationship for me is Anon going to Soyo's apartment in episode 10, in that whole thing, that kind of confrontation there. And it's interesting because Anon, she was completely cast aside by Soyo. Soyo basically just said, we don't need her, and she was just using Anon for MyGo. But Anon saw how broken Soyo was, saw beyond all that, and assumed that Soyo had good intent and good reasons to do that. And I think that's just a really cool side of Anon, and for her to actually go ahead and take those steps to confront Soyo about it, to remedy it. And obviously that's influenced by Tomori, and Tomori bringing her back in that rooftop scene. I love it, and like I said, this is a relationship, a dynamic, a ship that I love, not just romantically, but as a pairing. As there's genuinely, and I think a lot of people don't realize this as well, there's genuinely a lot to analyze about them beyond just the kind of typical romantic ship. I know a lot of artists will depict them as like a toxic ship, and for sure there is a lot of toxicity there, especially in MyGo. They're in a much healthier place now, obviously, but I think they're really good. I think they're really cool. I really do like Anon and Soyo, and as should everyone, really. And I've seen a lot of people that have finished MyGo and they were like, oh, I was expecting more from them, and then over time they just get infected and poisoned by the Anzi ship in the community, which is pretty funny. But yeah, really love them, really big fan of them. And now we have Anon and Taki. Again, a dynamic I really like. I think I'll put it in a high A. For me, there isn't much romantically. I'm interested in shipping them. It's not how I view them, but I really do like how they both care for Tomori a lot, how they express that care in different ways, and how they kind of, the thing is, they're not fighting over Tomori, because Anon doesn't have that kind of view. It's more a one-sided thing from Taki, where she'll see an affection from Tomori and Anon towards each other, and Taki will be like, what the fuck, and then she'll get pissed off and get annoyed at Anon. But they do just have a sweet dynamic as well. They're also just kind of hilarious in the show. Like, they're a lot of what the comedy is made up of in MyGo. It's just Taki and Anon bickering and being annoying towards each other. But I mean, the scene that stands out the most to me is the episode 11 scene after obviously the MyGo come together, and they have that scene where they're sitting down, and Taki recognised Anon's bandages on her fingers and how she was practicing despite what was going on, and she says it takes, I think it was maybe courage or something. I can't remember the exact words, but she basically praises Anon for that. And there's this kind of long silence between them as they just kind of stare at each other, and Anon again teases her, and they do just have a really sweet relationship. And it's a very, obviously Soyo is like kind of the mum of the group. Anon and Taki are kind of viewed as sisters. I think that's a nice way to view them. It's kind of a sisterly bond, kind of always bickering with each other, but there is this underlying appreciation they have for each other, and how much they are foundations of the band, and how much they have impacted each other, not just towards how they act towards Tomori, but how they function in the band. Because Taki's very strict, but she is constantly pushing Anon to be better in the band and musically as well, which is good. And Anon needed that. No one else in the band would have pushed Anon like that musically to perform and get as good as she did, get to that point where she can perform that duo with Rana. She needed Taki to be there to do that, and I think that's just awesome. It's awesome to have them do that. And next we have Anon and Tomori. For me, there isn't. I know a lot of people like to kind of ship these two romantically. For me, there's nothing between them romantically, but they're like. I know this is kind of almost a meme. They're like best friends, but I don't mean it like in terms of an erasing their homosexuality kind of way. And I genuinely think they just have an incredibly genuine and sweet platonic relationship between them. And it's not that I am against other people shipping them. I don't care. You can do what you want. But for me, there just isn't anything there romantically, and their dynamic is incredibly. This is insane in my life. What am I talking about? They're the core of MyGO. Those 13 episodes, their journey, they were the original two to get lost together, and they were the original two that. I mean, they're literally kind of the first proper dynamic you get in the show. Basically, is them two. Anon being a bit insensitive towards Tomori, learning how to deal with Tomori and her neurodivergency. Tomori learning to accept Anon into her life and kind of let Anon. I think what I like the most between them is how they push each other to be better, but it's not as forcefully as Taki might push Anon or Soyo, and it's just a much more sweet and gentle relationship. And I mean, beyond they're just very cute together. They, like I said, they really are. They're a heartbeat of the show. They're not the heartbeat of the show. If you know, you know who I think the heartbeat of the show are. But they're up there. They are like, they're a defining pair in the show. I mean, a lot of what we see in the first, 10 episodes is a lot of Anon and Tomori dynamic and interaction. And I mean, one of my favourite scenes with them is, I think it's episode 4, when the band is kind of getting back together, and Tomori thanks Anon for that, and what Anon did for Tomori, what Tomori does for Anon. Obviously episode 5 is kind of their episode, and there's just such a, like I said, it's just a genuine, sweet and gentle relationship between those two that I don't think there's anything like it in the show. As for a show that is very toxic and full of lots of debatable and harmful relationships, Anon and Tomo really stand out as an incredibly light and gentle pairing. And I like that. That is something that we need in this show, and thankfully we have it with them. And as we have Anon and Mujica, which is an interesting one, because again, there isn't much between them in terms of interactions. I think about the extent of it is obviously Anon being a fan of Sumimi, and then we get that scene in episode 9 of Mujica where Mujica meets with Anon in the Hazara cafe, and obviously Anon and Mujica starts to spiral a bit, but again, there isn't a lot between them. And this is kind of a common theme between a lot of the MyGO and other Mujica members, is that they do not interact as much as I expected them to, and a lot of their dynamic and a lot of their relationship is buried under the text, and it's something you kind of have to dig out more rather than you get explicit interactions between them, if you get me. But I mean, for me, Anon and Mujica, there's just not much going on there between them. There's definitely, Mujica's definitely, you can see an exaggeration of what Anon is, and Anon who was trying to fit in, wearing this mask and just kind of going with the flow and just trying to do what she can to just fit in and go with the trends. I think Mujica, there's definitely a part of it that does that as well, but Mujica, it's much more exaggerated given what happened and her circumstances with Hatsune and all that kind of stuff and her family. I don't kind of say that Week is a more toxic version of Anon, or what an Anon with a poor family foundation is, but there's definitely there's parallels there between them that I should probably look into more. So it's definitely not C. I think I can put it around there. It seems fitting. And then we have Anon and Tomori. I don't think there's anything that I can really comment on between them. No, I was trying to think of anything really, but for me there's just nothing really going on there, It's not much I can really extrapolate. And like I said, if I'm missing obvious things, if there's certain things you like about the pairings that I haven't talked about as much, then feel free to leave in the comments. I'd love to read more on more obscure pairings. And now we're on to Mutsumi and Mortis. I mean, wow. Obviously going into Mujica, this isn't something you could even predict. It's not something you would expect at all, and this is a direction that they take with Mutsumi that was something that they didn't plan. It was changed in the script. It was changed. Obviously, the original script did not have Mortis involved at all. It wasn't even in existence. But wow, did Mutsumi and Mortis, that whole thing, get executed so well. How Mortis sees Mutsumi on the edge. She's on the brink, and it's all too much for Mutsumi. So she steps in. She steps in recklessly to save Mutsumi without much thought of her own and without much thought of what she plans to do. Because obviously she wants to protect Mujica, she wants to protect Mutsumi, but how does she? What? When you look at it from a more logical standpoint, what was she even going to do? She can't play the guitar, so that's such an important part of Mujica, and Mortis wanted to protect that she can't do. That she didn't even have. I don't think she even in the beginning she had no intention at all to even learn to play the guitar. She kind of just stepped in, was like, okay, I just gotta let Mutsumi relax and just go to sleep, because she's had so much. It's been too much for her. So Mortis steps in, and it all goes wrong, and she doesn't know what to do. She has no idea how to handle that. And then we get the whole conflict between Mutsumi and Mortis, being obviously Mutsumi is unhappy with how Mortis handled things. Mutsumi wants Kreisig back. Mortis doesn't want Kreisig back. And I really love what their relationship ended up, how it was resolved, and how it's going to be moved along in the future, and how a lot of the other alters have awakened, and it's not a fusion situation. It's not like anything like that. There's just several more other personalities older personalities of Mutsumi that have awakened, and Mutsumi can call upon, and they help each other, and they kind of function together. And Mutsumi Mortis, like I said, it was such an unexpected direction to go with the story and with Mutsumi's character, but it was done so incredibly well. I mean, the amount of screen time that they got, I think they probably got the most, maybe apart from Saki. I'm not too sure. Maybe they did get the most in Mujica, but they were just handled so amazingly, and the kind of ambiguity of the ending between them, and the ambiguity of their happiness and what they had to sacrifice to get to the place they're in now. I'm a really big fan of those two and what happened between those two. Is it something I'd ship? Is it a self-obsessed thing? I don't really care. There's some cool art, but I'm not into that per se. But if you are, go crazy. I like the art. I'll retweet and repost the art any day if it's good. So now we have Nyamu and Mortis. And Nyamu and Mutsumi, which I think are both, I kind of want to put them together. And it's interesting them two, because I mentioned it in another video how their relationship I do not have a firm grasp on. as much as a lot of the others, and despite that, I think they're really compelling, and I really like what they do with Nyamu, and it's very much a review starlight-esque, and how they handle Nyamu's envy and her love and her hatred towards Mutsumi and Mortis, and how she kind of projects her own insecurities and fears onto Mutsumi and Mortis, but Mutsumi and Mortis kind of accept that, and they kind of rise up to that, and we get that incredible scene in episode 10 of our Mujica of those two. And I am just a big fan of how tightly Nyamu and that whole storyline, that whole arc in particular of Nyamu towards Mutsumi and Mortis is written. It's not something that gets an overly amount of focus. It's not something that gets kind of swept under the rug. It's always there, and it's still there for them. Even now, I can't remember what it was. It was one of the it was an audio thing, maybe from Bilibili, a promotion on Bilibili. I'm not too sure, but there's the rivalry between them now, and like I said, it's very much a review starlight-esque rivalry between them, which is cool. And as I mentioned, that it's a dynamic and a relationship I haven't got a solid grasp on, and like I said, despite that, I really do like them, and I like what they represent in the story. I like how unexpected this kind of dynamic was prior to having Mujica. I mean, I wouldn't have really thought there'd be much between them in terms of, like, at the end on, because it's definitely, obviously, it goes in the entertainment industry and the acting, and I wouldn't expect any of that from Mutsumi, but that's a huge part of her character. And Nyamu is interesting because her whole downfall is centered on that, and on Mortis and Mutsumi and her acting and that kind of thing. And again, it's in a similar way to Taki and Anon. They are pushing each other to be better, and I really like how Mutsumi has kind of embraced that and isn't running away from that, especially from a character like Nyamu, who can be quite imposing, who can be quite... it can be a lot, basically. It can be quite jarring at times, and Mutsumi doesn't shy away from that. Doesn't, especially in the latter half of the series, Mutsumi and Mortis, they both face Nyamu head on, and Nyamu eventually has to match that, because otherwise there's no way she would even survive in the band, in her own deal outside the band. She has to face it. And like I said, for me, them two, they're a very review starlight-esque rivalry. You could put them into review starlight and they'd fit right in, which is really cool, because review starlight's amazing. Next we have Nyamu and Saki. A really interesting dynamic between those two. I think there's definitely a lot of shipping potential in terms of how Nyamu is a similar sort of kind of way that Nyamu teases Saki that you can see in Anon and Soyo, but obviously the position that Saki has put herself in now is it's hard to compare that to Anon and Soyo, because Nyamu is willing to do anything now at this point for Saki, for her god, for someone who saved her. And despite that, Nyamu will still be annoying. I saw it recently on Twitter, that picture of it's the mayor, and it's just a picture of a guy with his feet up, and he's like, every now and then I like to just go into the mayor's office and annoy him, and it's Saki and Nyamu, which is so accurate. It's very funny, but they're really interesting. Their kind of power dynamic, and we see it throughout Ave Mujica, the way they're grappling with each other for authority on the band. Obviously, Saki has it in the beginning. Nyamu very quickly tears that down and takes it herself, before then things go even further south and it's taken away from both of them by Mortis. And Nyamu basically clocks Saki's entire deal in episode 10 with Rika at the mansion, and I love that insightful side of Nyamu, who, because of just the industry she's in, the way she's kind of been forced to, not mature, but forced, and Nyamu's definitely been forced to grow up quicker than the rest of the girls given her situation. I think Saki as well has been forced into that given her whole deal with her family, but Nyamu's in an industry, a very harsh industry, a very demanding industry, and she has to kind of match up to that, and it's allowed her to become more insightful about other people. She can see through it, and she's willing to just call that bullshit out how it is, because she hasn't got time, she hasn't got the energy to mess around and play around with other people like that. And we see it in Anon Mujica 4 when the band break up, we see it in Anon Mujica 10 as well, and it's nice to just have someone just straight up call out Sakiko a lot of the time, and it not be done in a way that Mortis does it, where it's Mortis can be very overbearing and a lot, and you often get the vibe that Mortis is acting quite unfairly and quite abrasively, but Nyamu, a lot of her criticisms and a lot of her anger towards Sakiko feels very justified, and again, they needed someone in the band to be able to just straight up call that bullshit out if necessary. So I think I'd like to put these in A, probably above Anon and Rana. And then we have Nyamu and Umari, which is I really do love them. And do I love them more than Nyamu and Mortis and Mutsumi? I think I do. And for me, it's more an entertainment factor of just how funny they were in, I mean, episode 8, that whole thing, their kind of banter they have with each other, their kind of Umari, who is they're both very straightforward and don't decorate their words or their gestures. I mean, especially Umari post episode 7, who became like that, and Nyamu has always been like that, so I like the way they interact with each other in that straightforward manner, and a manner that is entrenched in a lot of banter and humour. And in a similar way to Umari and Taki, they just feel like an incredibly natural pairing and a very real pairing in their interactions, in their conversations and everything like that, which is refreshing. That's not to say that the other pairings are more forced, but having that naturalness to a show like MyGO, where a lot of things is very dramatic and over the top, it does ground certain characters in certain parts of the story, and Nyamu and Umari, I think, are a pairing that do that well. Again, they are a pairing that I ship. I will ship them two together. I ship Nyamu and Umari kind of being a bit pathetic of Nyamu, and Nyamu just kind of dragging Umari along with her. They're very fun, and there's a lot to talk about them and analyze about them, but beyond everything, beyond all that kind of stuff and that analysis, and they're just an incredibly fun pairing, and they suit each other so well. And if it wasn't for Taki, then Umari and Nyamu would be kind of a one true pairing. But Taki and Umari exist, and they are incredible. So now we got on to Rana. How much have we done already? 3, 7, 10, 13, 15, and I think there's maybe 50 something. I'm not too sure. So maybe, I think we'll probably end up doing half today and half another time. But now we're on Rana and Mortis, and Rana and Mutsumi. They're awesome. And I think I like them more than Nyamu and Mutsumi and Mortis, interestingly enough, because I like Mortis having a pairing that is very friendly and healthy. It's incredibly refreshing, actually, to see Mortis click so quickly with someone. And of course it had to be Rana. Of course Rana would be the one that would be able to see through Mutsumi and Mortis' DID, would be able to connect with Mortis on a level that is beyond just a means for Mutsumi, essentially. And similarly with Mortis and Mutsumi, I think I'll put them in A. I kind of want to just put them next to, because I think they're very interesting. They have a lot of interesting parallels, which I do mention in that episode 6 reaction. I think how they're both infatuated by our main character, Tomori and Sakiko, respectively, from each band. Music is a huge part of their life, but for Mutsumi, it was something that wasn't nurtured at all by her family, compared to Rana, who had the support of her family. If Mutsumi had the support of her family that Rana had, she would be in a much more healthier place and a much more positive place regarding music. And it's also interesting, obviously, how they're both very reserved verbally, but Rana will just speak her mind and speak what she wants. If she wants matches, she'll ask for it. If she wants to perform live, she'll just straight up say it and ask for it. Compared to Mutsumi, who does seal her words because of the consequences they've had in the past, and socially isn't as. The thing is, they're both socially not as able and not as aware as most of the guys, and just people in general, but in very different ways. Mutsumi cares a lot about that and doesn't want to infringe on other people like that, in the whole social situation she's in. She just doesn't even bother to even engage in it, because she's afraid of the possible consequences of her own words and her actions and her feelings. Compared to Rana, who just doesn't really care. She'll just say it, and she'll just, whether it's the right thing to say in the situation, whether it makes sense or not, she'll just do it, and it's not something that affects her. And I like how they parallel each other like that, and how it's almost like Rana is a freer version of Mutsumi, which is sad, because it is inherently because of their different backgrounds and upbringings. That Mutsumi is obviously a much more harmful and toxic environment than Rana did. Also, Rana and Mortis in particular, I've kind of shipped them a bit, and because they just have an affinity for each other, which I think is sweet. And I like how Mortis is very infatuated by Rana, but Mutsumi is very infatuated by Rana's guitar playing, and we see that in episode, obviously when Mutsumi wakes up because of Rana's guitar, and the emotions that it brings out, because it's singing something that Mutsumi couldn't do with her guitar. So yeah, I really do like those two, and again, it's a pairing that I was not expecting at all going into Mujica, but it makes so much sense. I think compared to other pairings like Nyamu and Umari and Nyamu and Mutsumi Mortis, it's not a pairing that I could have predicted, but this is a pairing that if before the story, before Mujica started, I could have kind of if I thought about it hard enough, I would have thought, yeah, this makes a lot of sense actually, and there's a lot here. But yeah, I'm a big fan of them. Rana and Nyamu, they're two very intuitive cats, and because they're both cats, that is kind of it between them. There's not much else to say. They don't really do much as a pairing. They're just both fun cats that can see through people very easily, and they're two of the more entertaining characters in each band, and kind of provide a lot of comedic relief or more lightheartedness in the band, which is nice, obviously. And now we're on to Rana and Saki. I mean, I don't know. Is there anything I'm missing there between them? I'm I'm not sure. Does it even exist? I don't think I've seen any fan art of them two together, but yeah, they're two characters that exist in the show, I guess. Soyo and Rana, not much going on there again. I think Soyo has a kind of motherly instinct towards Rana, like she does with the whole band, and there's definitely a protectiveness there, but it's not as pronounced as Taki and Rana, which is a much better pairing for Rana. I don't know how high this would go. I think it's better than Anon and Rana. And they're just a very sweet dynamic, Taki and Rana. They obviously both have an affinity for Tomori. Taki kind of ended up being the one that is looking after Rana the most. And ended up, I've seen a few people kind of ship them, and it's a fun ship, but I think they're just more of a cute dynamic. Taki is always looking out for Rana, which is very nice. Rana does need someone like that in her life, and Taki has kind of stepped up to be that, which is cool. But yeah, there's not much going on with Rana, with a lot of characters in general with Rana. And again, Rana and Mujica. I mean, again, sorry, I guess you're down there. I don't know if it's better than Rana or Saki. I'm sure. Let's just say it is. And Rana Umari, again, it exists. It's in the show, I guess. It's kind of just the case with Rana that they don't even, like, they kind of keep to themselves, and they have a few very strong dynamics with characters. I mean, we may as well do Rana's other only dynamic now, which is Rana and Tomori. I really love. That's the wrong one. There we go. Rana and Tomori. Rana and Tomori are great. They're really great, and they might be low S. Yeah, because Rana found a place to belong in MyGO, and with Tomori, on stage with Tomori, and how Rana, when she sees Tomori hesitate, will kind of turn away and not be as interested. But when she sees Tomori make her move, Rana will help her, will do a lot to help her as well. I mean, episode 10 wouldn't exist without Rana. Rana's the one that kicks things into gear. She stands on stage with Tomori initially, and then she brings Taki into it. And I think they're two characters that also have a very sweet relationship in the series, and it's one that isn't really verbalized between them. But I think just having they're two characters very comfortable to just exist alongside each other. And like I said, we see in the Breathing Next to You event in the game, Taki and Rana's event, the whole story, and how much Rana values being able to stand on stage and play with Tomori, and Tomori's kind of genuine expression of her feelings and her song and her emotions. Rana is one of the people in this show, I mean, as a lot of characters in this show do, who truly appreciates that kind of genuineness from Tomori, and it's infectious to Rana. Rana wants to stay around her because of that, and wants to continue playing on stage because of that, and also has, like I mentioned before, Taki has an interesting dynamic, but with Taki because of Tomori. So yeah, I'm a big fan of those two. Tomori hasn't appeared much yet, I guess. I'm probably going to do another recording for this, because this is almost an hour long. It'll be a part 1, and then we'll do the rest another time. So how much we got? We got 3, 6, 10, 14, 1924. So I think I'll do I'll do these three Saki pairings, and then because we haven't done too much Saki in this yet, so we'll do these three Saki pairings: Saki, Mortis, and Saki. We'll do Saki, Mortis for now, and then we'll do these three, and then next part will just be the rest. Which, I think that's about kind of even each way. But yeah, Saki and Mortis are really fascinating dynamic, and it's not quite at the top, but I think I'll put it there because it's interesting how initially Saki doesn't even recognize Mortis as this person. She barely even recognizes Mortis. Mortis' existence, and there's definitely an ableist angle there, but eventually she does end up accepting Mortis, her existence, and obviously thanking her for it in that episode 8 scene. And Mortis, obviously, her whole kind of existence for the first half of the show is hatred towards Saki, and I don't say it's blind hatred, because a lot of her feelings are justified with the way that Saki treated Mutsumi, and seeing Mutsumi in so much pain a lot of the time because of a result of Saki is genuine reasons for Mortis to step in and be angry towards Sakiko. But it gets to a point where I feel like Mortis is just hating on Sakiko because that's all she knew and that's all she knows to do. She's surviving on that hate, in a weird comparison, in a similar way that Thorfinn was surviving on that hate and that revenge towards Askeladd in season 1 of Vinland Saga. And it's going to be interesting moving forward to see them two interact and Mortis kind of overcome that bias towards Sakiko, and also how Sakiko ends up treating Mortis in the process, because Sakiko's become this godlike figure. She's become god in the band, and we've seen how everyone in the band has reacted to that and has reciprocated those feelings and kind of said, yeah, we'll serve you as knights. But we haven't really seen what Mortis thinks of that, and how she feels about Saki taking up that position and Mutsumi bowing down to this person that Mortis once hated so much. Obviously the hatred for Mortis isn't theirs anymore, but I'm very fascinated to see what kind of direction they go, given how important Saki and Mutsumi's relationship is. And they go up there because, yeah, Saki Mutsumi, just an incredibly tragic pairing, because they care about each other so deeply, possibly more or just as much as anyone else in the show, in terms of how strong their feelings are towards each other. Obviously they've grown up together and they've just been really, it's always been external things that have kind of torn them apart and caused such discourse between the two, because while they care about each other so much, they are not very good at expressing that care, and not very good at verbalizing those feelings. And with Mutsumi in particular, if those feelings are not verbalized, she isn't going to understand them, or they aren't going to reach her. And despite Mutsumi possibly not even realizing the extent to how much Sakiko cares for her, she still cares for Sakiko a ridiculous amount. I mean, even after everything Sakiko does towards Mutsumi and the harm she causes for Mutsumi, all Mutsumi cares about is Sakiko, and it's to her own detriment. It's to her own she's putting others before herself, and Mortis rightfully steps in and says, you need to stop this and kind of take a step back and realise that you're the one that is being hurt from all this, so put yourself first for once. And even then, she doesn't really. She doesn't. These aren't feelings that are overcome in any way. They're not healthy feelings towards each other either, because of how much self-sacrifice there is from either side for Sakiko and Mutsumi. And like I said, Mutsumi does that, and Sakiko does exactly the same. Sakiko was willing to bring back Kreishik, something that she had no intention of doing, just for Mutsumi's sake. I mean, God knows how that would have gone. It would have gone terribly, I'm sure. And again, she brings back Mujica for Mutsumi's sake, essentially, along with obviously all the other bandmates' sake. She sacrifices to herself and her own feelings regarding that. She takes up this deity position, this transcendent position in the band, at the sacrifice of herself to please the rest of the band. And again, we see in the intermissions that all Sakiko wanted is to go back to that time when she was younger, playing with Mutsumi and Mortis, we find out, making music, just playing in the garden, just a much more simpler time before everything went wrong. And for Mutsumi, that was also a retreat for her, not being around her family that hates her so much. So she must feel similarly in that way, that is such a cherished time for her, and that is all that Sakiko wanted. And she's essentially kind of sacrificed that. I mean, it's not like she was ever going to go back to that time anyway. It's a similar kind of situation to Kreishik, where it was a precious time, but it's certainly heightened by time and nostalgia, and it's not something that they can go back to. But it's something that Sakiko has truly kind of, what's the word, dug a grave for, almost, that desire to just happily play with Mutsumi, with no feelings, with no other issues to even consider. And their whole relationship is just tragic, because there's never a real time where both of them are happy at the same time. Obviously, throughout MyGO, Sakiko is just going through shit. Mutsumi is the same. They're both not. I mean, you could argue before, obviously episode 7 and how Hikage and Soyo kind of stepping into things, they are both in a decent spot, but Sakiko is still living with her father and living in that kind of terrible situation. Mutsumi doesn't really know what to do, or doesn't know how to help Sakiko regarding that. She has her own family issues. We go into Mujica, a band created just for Sakiko to forget about Kreishik and forget about all these horrible things. Ended up putting Mutsumi into the spotlight, ending up causing more harm for Mutsumi, ending up bringing a whole nother character, a whole nother personality that was dormant in Mutsumi, who exists at the expense of Mutsumi's own feelings towards Sakiko, at kind of a direct opposite to that, in terms that she hates that Mortis hates Sakiko compared to Mutsumi, who loves her. Things get resolved with Kreishik. We see Mutsumi and Sakiko talk it out, awkwardly express their feelings toward each other, both feeling like it was their fault. Kreishik happened, the Kreishik reunion happens, things are resolved. no, Mutsumi wants Kreisig back. Sakiko is willing to sacrifice herself to bring Kreisig back. And it's just, we see them both kind of happily at the start of episode 8, and that's a very fleeting moment. It's a very fleeting time. It almost a dreamlike kind of moment. And now again at the end of Mujica, they're in that dreamlike state again, just a more permanent one this time. That the thing is, you can call Mujica and the characters happy now in their band, but it's not. It's hard to even argue if that's real or true happiness, because it's all illusionary. It's all something that could just crumble down at any moment, and it's being held together by Sakiko and held together by glue and tape and patchwork designs that aren't going to last. So it's a blissful happiness. It's an ignorant happiness that essentially means that they have to sacrifice a lot of what they personally desire, a lot of their personal relationships and their feelings towards each other to maintain this dreamlike state. And it's such a fascinating, I've mentioned it before, but it's such a fascinating way to end the show in that state. And the fact that we're getting season 3, God knows what kind of dynamic we're going to be seeing from there on out. But yeah, Mutsumi, Saki, they're above. I need to put them above those two actually. Because I really do love them. I kind of ship them a little, but I don't know, their relationship there's just so much there to get into that the romantic aspect for it to me is just it's just a side thing. It's like, sure, that can be nice, but I'm more interested in just how strong their feelings are for each other end up causing harm to each other, and their self-sacrificial nature ends up just contradicting each other and causing things to get worse. And then we have Sakiko and Umari, which up until like the last kind of 3 episodes, not 3 episodes, like kind of like that final stretch where Navi and Mujica reunite and Umari is the one that pushes for that. There wasn't really much between them that I thought that was interesting, but in the end, they have a fascinating dynamic. How much Umari does kind of bow down to her new god, and the kind of sacrifices that Umari could be willing to make to get that, and we saw it when she quits her band, all her other bands in episode 9. And it's just interesting because what is the extent that Umari is willing to do, and what is the extent that Sakiko is willing to use Umari and take advantage of that kindness? I'm not sure, but I think there's a lot there to discuss, and is interesting because I mean, Umari is very much one of the pragmatic ones in the band and was keeping things together alongside Sakiko. They were the two that were dealing with all the kind of technical stuff and all the behind the scenes stuff. And I'm sure Sakiko does appreciate Umari does appreciate her a lot for that. We haven't really seen that expressed from Sakiko's side. But Umari, I'm sure she doesn't even care to kind of hear that expression to love. As long as she's with Sakiko, as long as she's with Mujica, as long as the band is together, Umari's fine. And I think there's something really interesting about that, and about Umari's kind of self-depleting nature that leads her to take that role in the band, take that kind of a role that is kind of beneath her, a role that Umari can do better than, but she's resigned herself to, given all the things that have happened and how she wasn't able to make those connections with anywhere else. So I think them two are very interesting, and I'm excited to see the dynamic move forward again. We see it in a Billy audio, I think, of Umari kind of annoying Sakiko a bit, and Umari kind of vowing towards Sakiko and making sure that things are okay with the band and all that. But yeah, I think that is all for now, because this video I think is over an hour long by now, and I'm tempted to move these two up. Yeah, I will. I'll put them there for now. Maybe Nyamu and Umari go up. We'll see at the end, but I'm happy with this one now. I'll do the rest in another video because there's a lot of very interesting dynamics here I want to talk about and get into, more so than I think these ones are, because a lot of these are there's just a lot I can talk about with these, so I think this is a good point to end. Like I said, please feel free to comment on how you feel about any of these, if you disagree, if you agree, if there's things I'm overlooking, if there's things that you appreciate more about certain dynamics than others, if you ship kind of characters together. Well, mainly on the ones that I've gone through here, and again we can go through the rest in the next video. So thank you guys so much for watching, and see you later. See you for the next one.